The scent of lemon polish always brings me back to the same memory. The gleam of the mahogany dining table, polished to a mirror shine, reflecting the joy of Lisa's wedding day. I remember the way her eyes, bright with excitement, had met mine across the room. She was 23 then, so full of dreams, and I, Edith Morgan, was 52, bursting with pride. Every penny I had saved, every extra shift I'd picked up at the library, had gone into making that day perfect for her. Not that she ever asked, not directly, but I knew what she wanted, and I always made sure my children had what they needed, and then some. Now, 22 years later, the table is still polished, but the gleam feels different. It reflects a different kind of light, one that sometimes feels cold. Just last week, Lisa, my eldest, who is 45 now, called me up, not to chat, but to ask, "Mom, listen, the kids need new laptops for school, and frankly, my bonus isn't coming through till next quarter. Could you just spot me a few thousand, like you did for Thomas's car last year?" Her voice was breezy, as if she was asking me to pass the salt. "No, please. No, thank you. Just an expectation." Thomas, my middle child, who is 50, had indeed needed a new car, or rather, he'd wanted a new car, and I'd helped. Again. Clara, my youngest, 38, was the only one who ever seemed to remember what I'd done. But even she had her own life now, her own family to focus on. Tonight was no different. The kitchen was thick with the aroma of roasted lamb, garlic mashed potatoes, and my famous apple pie. I'd spent the better part of the day on my feet, preparing a feast. It was supposed to be a family dinner, a chance to catch up, but as soon as they arrived, the conversation shifted. Lisa, Thomas, and even Clara gathered in the living room, their voices a low murmur that occasionally erupted into laughter. I could hear snippets, that new development. "The market's really hot right now." I carried in the platter of lamb, steam rising, and set it down on the polished table. No one looked up immediately. Thomas was engrossed in his phone. Lisa was gesturing wildly, and Clara was nodding along. It felt like I was the caterer, not the hostess, not the mother who had built this home, brick by brick, memory by memory. Finally, Thomas looked up. "Looks good, Mom," he mumbled, already reaching for a slice. Lisa just smiled vaguely, her eyes still on Thomas as they continued their hushed discussion. "The real estate agent said it's a seller's market, Lisa said, loud enough for me to hear, but not looking at me. "Especially for older homes with good bones." Thomas nodded. "Yeah, but Mom's attached to this place. All those memories." He said memories like it was a quaint, inconvenient eccentricity. I sat down, feeling the familiar ache in my knees, a constant reminder of my 74 years. I picked at my food, the delicious meal suddenly tasting like ash. The conversation flowed around me about investments, about renovations, about future plans that clearly didn't include me. Then Lisa laughed, a sharp, bright sound. "Oh, Mom, you remember that time you tried to set up the smart speaker and it just kept playing polka music?" Thomas chuckled. "Yeah, she thought Alexa was a person. Bless her heart." Clara gave a small, sympathetic smile, but didn't correct them. It wasn't malicious, not overtly, but it was a casual dismissal, a gentle push to the side, a reminder that I was old, that my contributions were now more about amusement than wisdom. The warmth I once felt in my home turned into a chilling reminder of my marginalization. I was no longer the matriarch, the center. I was just Edith, the old woman who cooked their meals and occasionally provided entertainment with her quaint ways. And in their eyes, I was slowly, surely becoming a burden. A few weeks after that dinner, the one where I felt like the hired help, the house was full again. It was a Sunday afternoon, supposedly a casual get-together. Lisa, Thomas, and Clara were sprawled on the living room couches, their heads close, murmuring. I watched them from the kitchen, where I was putting out a platter of fruit and cheese I'd meticulously arranged. Their laughter, once the sweetest sound in my world, now felt like a closed door. I walked into the living room, a smile ready, hoping to join whatever lively discussion they were having. "What's so funny?" I asked, my voice perhaps a little too eager. Lisa glanced up, her smile faltering just a fraction. "Oh, nothing, Mom. Just reminiscing about old times. You know." Thomas grunted in agreement, not taking his eyes off his phone. Clara offered a small, apologetic smile, but didn't elaborate. They quickly shifted the conversation to something mundane, the weather, a new restaurant. It was like they had an invisible wall around them, and I was on the outside looking in. I tried again a little later. "You know, that reminds me of the time your father and I took you all camping up in the Sierras," I began, hoping to share a warm memory. Lisa must have been about 10, and she swore she saw a bear right outside the tent. We all huddled together, terrified, but it turned out to be just a shadow from a tree branch. I chuckled, remembering the silly fear, the closeness. Thomas, who was 50, rolled his eyes, a subtle movement, but I caught it. "Mom, we've heard that story 100 times," he said, a hint of impatience in his voice. Lisa chimed in, "Yeah, and honestly, you don't need to be involved in everything, Mom. Sometimes we just want to talk about adult stuff." Her tone was light, but the words felt like a physical shove. It wasn't always like this. I remembered a time, not so long ago, when my advice was sought, my presence cherished. When Lisa was struggling with her first job out of college, she'd call me every night, desperate for guidance. When Thomas, at 25, had his heart broken, he'd sat on this very couch, his head in my lap, letting me stroke his hair until he fell asleep. And Clara, my youngest, always the most sensitive, would bring me her drawings, her poems, seeking my approval, my understanding. I was their confidant, their anchor. My opinions mattered. My stories were treasured. Now, I was just a background fixture, a source of mild amusement or polite tolerance. My memory, once sharp enough to recall every detail of their childhoods, was now apparently a topic for their quiet jokes. Despite the sting, the quiet ache in my chest, I still found myself accommodating their needs. Lisa mentioned she was craving my chicken noodle soup, so I spent the next morning simmering broth, chopping vegetables, even though she hadn't offered to come over or help. Thomas casually mentioned his favorite cookies, and I baked a fresh batch, the house filling with the comforting scent of vanilla and chocolate. I still wanted to be needed, to be loved, to be the mother they once ran to. Later that afternoon, as they were gathering their things to leave, I overheard them again. Their voices were hushed, but the words carried. "So, next Friday then," Lisa whispered. "Yeah, I've already booked the place," Thomas replied. "Mom doesn't need to know the details yet. We'll just tell her it's a family dinner. Clara looked uncomfortable. Are you sure about this, Lisa? She's going to be really hurt. Lisa scoffed. She'll get over it. It's for her own good, really. Less stress for her. A cold dread settled in my stomach. A family dinner that I wasn't supposed to know the details of? My mind raced, trying to piece together what they were planning. It wasn't just about a dinner. I knew that much. This was bigger. This was about something they were hiding, something they were deciding for me, without me. The casual dismissiveness, the hushed conversations, the subtle eye rolls, it all coalesced into a chilling premonition. A storm was indeed brewing, and I, Edith, was standing right in its path, utterly unprepared for the deluge. The phone rang late Tuesday afternoon, just 3 days before the mysterious family dinner I wasn't supposed to know about. It was Lisa. Her voice, usually so self-assured, had a tremor in it. Mom, thank goodness you picked up. Look, I know this is last minute, but something's come up, a real emergency. My heart immediately went to Sophia, Lisa's daughter, my 22-year-old granddaughter. Sophia, is she all right? I asked, a knot forming in my stomach. No, Sophia's fine, Lisa quickly assured me, though her tone still sounded strained. It's a work thing, a huge opportunity, but it requires an immediate investment, like today. And my bank transfer is somehow delayed, and Thomas is tied up with something, and Clara's out of town. You're the only one I can trust right now, Mom. I just need a quick loan, a bridge, just until my funds clear. It's a guaranteed return, honestly, a really smart move for me. And it would really help me get this promotion I've been working so hard for. She named a figure that made my 74-year-old mind reel. It was substantial, more than I usually kept in my checking account. I hesitated. My savings were for my old age, for emergencies. I might have. But Lisa sounded genuinely distressed, and the thought of her missing out on a career-defining opportunity because of a bank glitch, it tugged at my heart. She was my daughter, after all. I'd always been there for her. How soon do you need it? I asked, already knowing the answer. Within the hour, Mom. Seriously, it's that urgent. I'll pay you back next week. Promise. With interest, even. She added, a little too quickly. I sighed. All right, Lisa. I'll transfer it. But this is a lot, dear. You're the best, Mom. You always save the day, she gushed, and for a moment I felt a familiar warmth, a sense of being valued. The warmth was fleeting. Later that evening, after I'd made the transfer, I was puttering in the kitchen, trying to decide what to make for dinner. My mind kept drifting back to the family dinner I'd overheard them planning for next Friday. I still hadn't been officially invited. I picked up my phone, debating whether to call Clara, to ask her what was going on. But I stopped myself. I didn't want to seem needy, or worse, like I was prying. I told myself it was probably just a surprise party for someone, and they wanted to keep it a secret. A surprise for me? Perhaps. The thought, however fleeting, brought a small hopeful smile to my lips. Then I heard Lisa's voice, clear as a bell, from Thomas's phone. He must have accidentally pocket-dialed me. I heard laughter, a clinking of glasses. They were at a restaurant. And honestly, she just handed it over, Lisa was saying, her voice not strained at all, but rather light, triumphant. Like taking candy from a baby. She probably thinks it's for some noble cause. Thomas chuckled. Well, it is for a noble cause, isn't it? Our future. Exactly, Lisa said, and then I heard Clara's voice, sounding a little uncomfortable. Lisa, don't you think that's a bit... She really does try to help. Oh, please, Clara, Lisa scoffed. She's got more money than she knows what to do with, and it's not like she's using it. It's just sitting there. Besides, she's so out of touch. She thinks her financial contributions are some grand gesture. She has no idea what real financial planning looks like. Honestly, her decision-making skills are practically non-existent these days. It's better if we handle things. My hand trembled, and I nearly dropped the phone. The warmth I'd felt earlier, the fleeting sense of being valued, evaporated, leaving behind a bitter chill. This wasn't a surprise party for me. This wasn't even a family emergency. This was a calculated deception. They were laughing at me, at my willingness to help, at my perceived naivete, my financial contributions, my sacrifices. They were not seen as love, but as a resource to be exploited, a sign of my weakness, my declining faculties. The next evening, Wednesday, the phone rang again. It was Lisa. Mom. So, exciting news. We're having a big family dinner this Friday night at the Grand Oak to celebrate my promotion. It's a bit last minute, but we'd love for you to come. 7:00 sharp. Her voice was cheerful, utterly devoid of the strain from the day before. She made no mention of the emergency loan, no mention of paying me back. I swallowed, the bitterness still lingering. Oh, that sounds lovely, dear. I managed, my voice steady, despite the tremor in my hands. A promotion, not a family emergency. The pieces clicked into place. The hushed conversations, the exclusion, the casual dismissal of my memory, the loan. It was all part of a larger scheme. I was being played. The drive to the Grand Oak on Friday evening felt surreal. The setting sun cast long shadows, mirroring the growing darkness in my heart. A mix of hope and anxiety still churned within me. Hope, because a small, foolish part of me still wanted to believe there was a misunderstanding, that they truly wanted me there. Anxiety, because the cold, hard facts of Lisa's phone call and the pocket-dialed conversation gnawed at me. I was driving towards a dinner I was invited to, yet I knew, deep down, that a different kind of betrayal was waiting for me. The valet at the Grand Oak took my keys with a practiced smile, but I barely registered him. The restaurant's facade, all gleaming glass and polished brass, seemed to mock the unease churning in my stomach. It was Friday evening, and the setting sun cast long, dramatic shadows across the parking lot, mirroring the growing darkness in my heart. I pushed open the heavy oak doors, the scent of expensive perfume and rich food immediately washing over me. The main dining room was abuzz with laughter and conversation. My eyes scanned the room, and there they were, at a large round table near the back, bathed in the warm glow of a chandelier. Lisa, Thomas, and Clara were all there, along with a few faces I recognized as Lisa's colleagues and some extended family I hadn't seen in years. A banner hung above their table, proclaiming Congratulations, Lisa. Balloons bobbed gently. It was indeed a celebration for her promotion. For a split second, a foolish part of me felt a flicker of relief, a hope that my anxieties had been unfounded. But then I saw their faces. Lisa was beaming, holding court, but Thomas looked a little too smug, and Clara, my youngest, looked distinctly uncomfortable, her gaze fixed on her plate. My heart sank. This wasn't just a promotion dinner. This was the family dinner they had been planning, the one I wasn't supposed to know the details of, the one where I was invited, but clearly not truly included. I started to walk towards them, my steps feeling heavy, each one a conscious effort. As I got closer, I heard Lisa's voice, clear and confident, cutting through the din. And honestly, with the market the way it is, it's perfect timing. We've already had a few offers, all above asking. It's just bricks, really, isn't it? She laughed, a brittle, dismissive sound. My breath hitched. Bricks? She wasn't talking about some investment property. She was talking about my home. Our home. The one I had raised them in. The one filled with every memory, every triumph, every tear. Thomas chimed in, his voice a little louder than necessary. Yeah, Mom's always been sentimental about it, but it's just a burden, really. All that upkeep. She's 74. She doesn't need a house that big anymore. He glanced towards Clara, who flinched but said nothing. Exactly, Lisa agreed, swirling the wine in her glass. Think of the freedom. Thomas, you can finally put that down payment on that boat you wanted. And Clara, that trip to Italy you've always dreamed of? It's practically paid for. She leaned in conspiratorially, her voice dropping slightly, but still audible to me as I stood just a few feet away, unseen. And I can finally get that summer house in the Hamptons I've been eyeing, all from Mom's, from the inheritance. A few of Lisa's colleagues chuckled politely, clearly uncomfortable. My legs felt like lead, my sanctuary, my memories, my home, reduced to just bricks, a burden, and an inheritance they were already spending. The casualness of it, the way they laughed, as if I were already gone, as if my life, my feelings, my very existence were irrelevant. The pain was a sharp physical blow, a shattering in my chest. Lisa finally looked up, her eyes widening slightly as she saw me standing there. Her smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of annoyance. Mom, you're here, she said, her voice suddenly strained. We were just discussing some things. She gestured vaguely towards an empty chair at the very edge of the table, almost an afterthought. Why don't you just take a seat over there for a moment? We're just finalizing some family business. We'll be right with you. Family business. That was it, then. I was an obstacle, a resource, but not a participant, not a person whose feelings mattered, not the beloved mother and grandmother I had always been. The words, wait in the car, might not have been spoken, but the sentiment was clear. Wait, be quiet, don't interfere. A strange calm settled over me. The humiliation was a hot flush on my cheeks, but beneath it, a cold, hard resolve began to form. I looked at Lisa, her triumphant smile now replaced by a thinly veiled impatience. I looked at Thomas, avoiding my gaze. I looked at Clara, whose eyes were filled with a remorse I couldn't quite decipher. I didn't take the seat. I didn't say a word. I simply turned my back to the table, to the laughter, to the casual cruelty. My dignity, though pierced, was not broken. I walked out of the Grand Oak, leaving behind the celebration, the betrayal, and the family who had just shown me exactly where I stood in their eyes. The evening air felt cool on my face, a stark contrast to the burning shame within. But with each step away, a quiet strength began to bloom. I was Edith, and I was not just bricks. The silence of my living room was a stark contrast to the cacophony of laughter and clinking glasses I'd left behind at the Grand Oak. It was late, past 10 o'clock on Friday night, and the house felt vast and empty. Every shadow seemed to hold an echo of Lisa's dismissive laugh, Thomas's casual grunt, the words just bricks, a burden, the inheritance, the scent of the roasted lamb from my own dinner preparations earlier in the week still faintly lingered, a cruel reminder of the effort I'd put into nurturing a family that now saw me as little more than a financial resource. I sank onto the sofa, the one where Thomas used to rest his head, the one where Lisa would curl up with a book. The cushions felt cold, unyielding. My chest ached, a dull, persistent throb. It wasn't just the betrayal of the house, though that was a monumental blow. It was the casual cruelty, the complete disregard for my feelings, my life, my very presence. They had discussed my future as if I were a piece of furniture to be moved, a problem to be solved. My stomach rumbled, a strange, almost defiant sound in the quiet. I hadn't eaten a bite at the restaurant, nor did I have the appetite for the leftovers I'd cooked. But a sudden, almost rebellious thought sparked. For 74 years, I had cooked, cleaned, nurtured, always putting others first. Tonight, I would do something just for me. I walked into the kitchen, bypassed the stove, and went straight to the freezer. I pulled out a pint of my favorite strawberry ice cream. No fancy dinner, no careful portioning, just a spoon and the entire carton. I sat back on the sofa, the cold sweetness, a small comfort against the bitterness in my mouth. It was a small act, a tiny rebellion, but it felt significant. It was the first decision I made in a long time that wasn't about accommodating someone else. As I ate, memories sharp and painful began to surface. The time Lisa had borrowed my car for a month, leaving me to rely on neighbors for rides, promising to pay for repairs she never did. The countless weekends I'd spent babysitting Sophia and her cousins, while Lisa and Thomas went on romantic getaways, never offering to pay for my time or even bring me a souvenir. The way Thomas always seemed to forget his wallet when we went out for lunch, leaving me to pick up the tab. It wasn't just about the money, it was the pattern, the casual assumption of my endless giving, the subtle erosion of my boundaries. I had always dismissed these instances as minor inconveniences, part of being a loving mother. Now, through the lens of their recent betrayal, I saw them for what they truly were: manipulative behaviors, a slow, steady draining of my resources, both financial and emotional. The clarity was painful, but also liberating. I had been so focused on being the good mother, the sacrificing matriarch, that I had allowed myself to be sidelined, taken for granted, and ultimately exploited. My health had declined, yes, but so had my voice, my agency. I had let them chip away at my role until I was just a ghost in my own home, a financial account to be plundered. The next morning, Saturday, the house still felt too big, too quiet. I needed to get out. I drove to the little cafe down the street, the Daily Grind, a place I rarely visited, preferring to make my own coffee at home. The aroma of roasted beans was comforting. I ordered a simple black coffee and found a small table by the window. As I sipped my coffee, a woman at the next table, perhaps in her late 60s, caught my eye. She had kind eyes and a gentle smile. She noticed me looking at her and offered a small nod. "Lovely morning, isn't it?" she said, her voice soft. "It is," I replied, surprised by how easily the words came. "You look like you could use a quiet moment," she observed, her gaze empathetic, not prying. "Sometimes A good cup of coffee and a bit of peace are all you need to set things right. I just nodded, a lump forming in my throat. I didn't say anything about my family, about the betrayal, but her simple kindness, her understanding gaze, was a balm. It was a small, fleeting connection with a stranger, but it was a reminder that there was a world outside my family, a world where warmth and empathy still existed. It was a glimmer of support, a quiet understanding that I hadn't realized how desperately I needed. I finished my coffee, feeling a tiny shift within me. The pain was still there, a dull ache, but now a flicker of something else had joined it, a quiet determination to reclaim my life, piece by piece. The quiet determination I'd felt at the cafe on Saturday morning solidified into a firm resolve by Monday. The sting of betrayal still lingered, a dull ache, but it was now accompanied by a surprising surge of clarity. I wasn't just going to sit and stew in my sorrow. I was going to understand exactly what I had given, and what I could still control. My first call was to a financial advisor whose name I'd seen advertised in the local paper, a woman, which felt important. Her name was Ms. Davies, and she sounded kind and professional on the phone. We set an appointment for Tuesday morning. Walking into Ms. Davies' office felt like stepping into a different world. It was calm, orderly, and smelled faintly of fresh coffee and new paper. Ms. Davies, a woman with intelligent, kind eyes, greeted me warmly. She didn't treat me like an old woman who was confused or forgetful. She treated me like a client, with respect. "So, Mrs. Morgan," she began, after we'd settled into comfortable chairs, "how can I help you today?" I took a deep breath. I want to get a clearer picture of my finances, my savings, my investments, everything, and I want to understand my options regarding my estate. The words felt heavy, yet empowering, as I spoke them aloud. Ms. Davies nodded, listening patiently. Over the next hour, as she pulled up my accounts, explained various statements, and outlined my portfolio, I felt a growing sense of astonishment. I had always been careful with money, a saver by nature, but I hadn't truly grasped the extent of what I had accumulated over decades of careful living and prudent investments. My late husband, God rest his soul, had been a good provider, and I had managed our finances diligently since his passing. My primary focus had always been ensuring I had enough for my own needs in old age, and then, of course, for my children. "Mrs. Morgan," Ms. Davies said, looking up from her screen, "you're in a very strong position. Your investments have performed exceptionally well over the years, and your savings are quite substantial. You've been very disciplined." I felt a strange mix of pride and a hollow ache. All this, and they still saw me as a burden, as someone to be managed. It was clear that my children, particularly Lisa and Thomas, had no real idea of my financial standing. They assumed I had enough to bail them out whenever they needed, but they certainly didn't imagine I had this much. This was far more than just sitting there. As Lisa had so casually put it, this was security. This was freedom. As we discussed potential changes to my will and how my assets were currently structured, it became glaringly obvious how dependent my children had become on my financial support. Ms. Davies, with gentle professionalism, pointed out several large transfers over the years. "These look like significant gifts, Mrs. Morgan. Were these intended as loans or outright gifts?" I looked at the figures. The down payment for Lisa's first house, the substantial sum for Thomas's business venture that never quite took off, the endless smaller loans that were never repaid. The money for Lisa's wedding, which I had considered a gift of love, but now, in this cold, clear light, felt like an expectation. They were to help them, I said, my voice quiet. I always wanted to help my children. Of course, Ms. Davies said kindly, and that's commendable. However, it's important to understand the implications of such generosity, especially when considering your long-term needs and your estate planning. If these were gifts, they are no longer part of your estate. If they were loans, there's a different legal avenue. That afternoon, back in my quiet home, I pulled out the old metal filing cabinet from the den. It was dusty, filled with decades of paperwork. I began to sort through it, a meticulous, almost cathartic process. Old bank statements, canceled checks, receipts for everything from Lisa's ballet lessons to Thomas's college tuition. I found the receipt for the down payment on Lisa's first house, clearly marked gift. I found the bank transfer confirmation for Thomas's failed business, also a gift. And then a stack of smaller checks, all written to Lisa and Thomas, marked loan in my own shaky handwriting. None of them ever paid back. The emergency loan from Tuesday was just the latest in a long, long line. As I compiled the evidence of my sacrifices, a strange sense of clarity washed over me. It wasn't just a feeling anymore. It was concrete. Numbers on paper, dates, signatures. This wasn't just my perception. This was documented history. I had given so much, silently, lovingly, believing it was appreciated, that it was building a strong foundation for them. Instead, it had built a foundation of expectation, of entitlement. The contrast between Ms. Davies's respectful demeanor and my children's casual dismissal of me was stark. Ms. Davies treated me as a capable, intelligent woman who had built a substantial life. My children treated me as a fading matriarch, a convenient ATM, a burden. Leaving Ms. Davies's office, I felt a quiet sense of empowerment. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the recognition, the dignity. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly seen, not for what I could provide, but for who I was. And that, I realized, was a powerful feeling indeed. The clarity I'd gained from my meeting with Ms. Davies on Tuesday and the stark reality of the documents I'd unearthed propelled me into action. I spent Wednesday morning on the phone. First, I called a lawyer, recommended by Ms. Davies, for a quick consultation. Mr. Henderson was brief and to the point, confirming my rights regarding my bank accounts and estate. He advised me on how to best protect my assets and ensure my wishes were legally binding. The conversation was empowering, laying out the practical steps I needed to take. Armed with this new knowledge, I drove to my bank first thing Thursday morning. The same bank where I transferred that emergency loan to Lisa just days before. My hands were steady as I spoke to the branch manager, a kind woman named Sarah. I explained in general terms that I needed to update my account access and beneficiaries. I closed the joint account I'd shared with Lisa for years, the one she'd used to borrow money without asking. I removed Thomas as a signatory on another investment account. I set up new individual accounts and updated my online banking passwords. It felt like severing invisible cords, one by one. Each click of the keyboard, each signature was a declaration of independence. When I walked out of the bank, The sunlight felt brighter, and a quiet sense of triumph swelled in my chest. The first call came that very afternoon. It was Thomas. "Mom? Hey, listen. The car's making this weird noise again. I think it's the transmission. And you know how expensive those are. I was thinking, since you helped me out last year, maybe you could just cover the repair? It's probably just a few thousand, nothing major." His voice was casual, expectant, just as it always was. My heart pounded, but I took a deep breath, remembering Mr. Henderson's advice, remembering the documents in my filing cabinet. "Thomas," I said, my voice calm, "I'm sorry to hear about your car. That sounds frustrating, but I won't be able to help you with that this time." A beat of stunned silence. Then, "What? Mom, what do you mean? It's just a loan. I'll pay you back. You know I will." "No, Thomas," I said, my voice gaining strength. "You haven't paid back the last few loans, have you? And I've decided I won't be making any more. You're a 50-year-old man, a capable man. You need to manage your own finances." "Mom, are you feeling all right?" he asked, his tone shifting from casual expectation to thinly veiled annoyance, then to a hint of concern, but it felt disingenuous. "You sound different. Are you sure you're not confused?" "I'm perfectly clear, Thomas," I said, my voice firm. "This is my decision. I love you, but my financial support is no longer something you can rely on." I hung up before he could argue further, my hand trembling slightly, but my resolve unbroken. Less than an hour later, Lisa called. She had clearly heard from Thomas. Her voice was sharp, laced with indignation. "Mom, what is going on? Thomas just called me, completely distraught. Are you really cutting us off? What about the money from my promotion investment? You promised." "Lisa," I said, my voice steady now, "that was not an investment. You misled me. And no, I won't be providing any more funds. I've made some changes to my accounts, and I'm managing my finances differently now." "Managing your finances differently?" She scoffed, a brittle laugh. "Mom, you're 74. What do you know about managing finances? We were just trying to help you. You're getting older. You're not as sharp as you used to be. We were planning for your future, for our future. This is ridiculous." "You're being completely irrational. My decisions are my own, Lisa," I replied, a coldness entering my voice that surprised even me. "And they are very rational. I suggest you and Thomas start making your own plans without relying on me." But what about the house?" she stammered, her voice suddenly losing its bite, a hint of panic creeping in. "We had plans for that. We were going to sell it, divide the profits, make sure you were comfortable in a smaller place. This was for your benefit." "The house is my home, Lisa," I stated, my voice unwavering, "and it is not for sale. Not by you, not by anyone else. Not without my consent, which you do not have." There was a stunned silence on the other end, then a frustrated sigh. "You're making a huge mistake, Mom. You'll regret this. We were trying to help you." The line went dead. She had hung up on me. I walked out onto my porch, the evening air cool and gentle on my face. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. My heart was still pounding, a mix of anxiety and a profound sense of liberation. It had been hard. Hearing their anger, their entitlement, their desperate attempts to manipulate me back into my old role, it had stung. But I had held firm. I had spoken my truth, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like Edith Morgan, not just mom or grandma, but a woman reclaiming her life, her dignity, her agency. The fight was far from over, I knew, but I had taken the first crucial steps, and I was breathing freely. The days following, my firm conversations with Thomas and Lisa were quiet, almost eerily so. The phone didn't ring with their usual demands or manipulative pleas. It was a silence I hadn't experienced in decades, and it was both unsettling and profoundly peaceful. I used this time, the quiet space I had finally carved out for myself, to prepare. My trusted neighbor, Harold Thompson, who was 76, stopped by one afternoon, bringing over a plate of his famous lemon bars. He'd seen my car at the bank and perhaps sensed the shift in the air. We sat on my porch, sipping iced tea. Harold, with his kind, knowing eyes, simply listened as I recounted, in broad strokes, the recent events. He didn't offer advice unless I asked, but his presence, his quiet understanding, was a comfort. "You've always been a strong woman, Edith," he said, patting my hand. Sometimes the hardest thing to do is to stand up for yourself, especially to those you love. But it's often the most necessary. His words resonated deeply. I also began to fill the beautifully bound journal I'd bought. It wasn't just a diary. It was a testament. I wrote about my life, my memories, the joy and the sacrifices. I wrote about raising my children, the dreams I'd had for them, the love I'd poured into this home. I wrote about the pain of feeling invisible, of being reduced to a financial resource. Each word was a step in reclaiming my narrative, transforming my hurt into a quiet, dignified strength. I filled it with anecdotes, wisdom, and the emotional legacy I wished to leave behind, not as a will, but as a heart-to-heart. A week after my calls with Thomas and Lisa, I sent them a simple text message. "Please come to the house next Saturday afternoon. There are some things we need to discuss as a family." I included Clara and Sophia in the message. I didn't elaborate, didn't threaten, just stated the need for a meeting. Saturday arrived crisp and clear. I had prepared nothing but coffee and water, no lavish meal, no pretense of a celebratory gathering, just the polished dining table and the journal resting at its center. Lisa arrived first, her expression a careful blend of defensiveness and curiosity. Thomas followed, looking uncomfortable, avoiding my gaze. Clara came next, her eyes sympathetic, giving my hand a quick, reassuring squeeze. Sophia, my granddaughter, arrived last, her young face etched with concern, her gaze shifting between me and her mother. We sat around the table, the same table where I'd overheard them plotting. The silence was thick, heavy, with unspoken accusations and anxieties. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice steady, though my heart fluttered. "I've asked you here because we need to talk. Not about money, not about property, but about us, about family." I picked up the journal. For the past few weeks, I've been writing in this. It's a collection of my memories, my thoughts, my feelings, about our life together, about this home, about what family means to me. I opened it to a page and began to read, my voice soft but clear. I remember the day Lisa took her first steps in this living room, clinging to the edge of the sofa. I remember Thomas building his elaborate train sets in the den, and Clara drawing pictures of fantastical creatures at this very dining table. This house isn't just bricks to me. It's the echo of laughter, the comfort of shared meals, the witness to every scraped knee and every proud milestone. It is the heart of our family, the place where we became us. I looked up. Lisa's face was unreadable, but Thomas shifted uncomfortably. Clara's eyes were glistening. Sophia was watching me intently, her expression thoughtful. I continued, reading passages about sacrifice, about the joy of giving, and then about the pain of feeling unappreciated, of being viewed as a burden. I didn't accuse. I simply stated my truth, my feelings. To hear my home, the place I poured my life into, dismissed as just bricks and a burden. To hear my children discuss my inheritance as if I were already gone. It was a wound deeper than any I've known. Lisa finally spoke, her voice tight. Mom, we never meant to hurt you. We just thought we were trying to make things easier for you. The house is a lot to manage. Making things easier or making things convenient for yourselves, I asked gently but firmly. I have always supported you, loved you, but that love was taken for granted, and my generosity was exploited. I am not a bottomless well, nor am I a fool. I am your mother, and I deserve respect and to be included in decisions about my own life. I closed the journal. This home, I said, placing my hand on the polished wood of the table, is not for sale. It is my sanctuary, and it holds generations of our memories. But I also understand that times change. My proposal is this. I will keep the house. It will remain our family home, a place for all of us to gather, to celebrate, to make new memories. It will be a communal space, a testament to the love that should unite us. But my financial support, as you have known it, will cease. You are all capable adults, and it is time you stood on your own 2 feet. Thomas looked shocked, but Lisa's eyes narrowed. So, you're just cutting us off? I am setting boundaries, I corrected her. I am reclaiming my agency, and I am asking for something in return. Your presence, your genuine connection, not just when you need something from me. I want my family back, not just my beneficiaries. Clara reached across the table and took my hand. Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have said something. I tried, but... She trailed off, tears in her eyes. Sophia spoke up, her voice clear. Grandma, I understand. I really do. She looked pointedly at her mother. Lisa and Thomas were quiet, the weight of my words, and perhaps the reality of their new financial independence settling upon them. They didn't apologize profusely, not in the way one might hope. The betrayal had left scars, and those wouldn't heal overnight. But they nodded. They agreed. The house would remain. The following months were a quiet rebuilding. I continued to live in my home, but the dynamic had undeniably shifted. Lisa and Thomas, forced to manage their own finances, struggled at first, but slowly they began to adapt. They called less often for money, and more often, surprisingly, just to talk. Clara became a more consistent presence, often bringing Sophia over for visits, and we'd spend hours talking, sometimes just sitting in comfortable silence. Sophia, now more aware of the family's past dysfunction, became a steadfast ally, her admiration for me growing into a quiet, respectful bond. I found myself spending more time in my garden, tending to the roses and hydrangeas. The flowers, once just a hobby, now felt like a metaphor. They bloomed, resilient and vibrant, even after being neglected, even after the harshness of a long winter. I, too, was blooming anew. My home, filled with the warmth of my own choices and a newfound sense of agency, felt truly mine again. The family gatherings were still sometimes a little awkward, the lingering consequences of betrayal still present in the unspoken spaces, but they were happening, and I, Edith Morgan, was at the center, not as a resource, but as the dignified matriarch, embracing a life of my choosing, looking ahead with hope.